Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 88 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, it's just a week since I was at Horse Hill in Surrey. And since then, operations have been progressing. Of course, the UCOG executives are still bragging about how much oil they anticipate being able to extract from beneath the Weald. Now, just to bring on screen here, the Weald Basin has been mined for oil for some time, relatively small quantities. But of course, UCOG, previously under the direction of David Lenegas and now under Stephen Sanderson, are still claiming that there are enormous quantities there. And of course, the mug punter investors are still responding accordingly. And basically, I think it's this time next year will be Millionaires Brigade. Well, call it a hunch, but somehow I think that that's a little bit of a fantasy world. Well, needless to say, the residents in the area are none too happy. And after the video that I played last week, where I filmed the walk-in on the Monday morning before heading down to the southwest for the evening's programme. Nonetheless, the police haven't changed their behaviour in any way, shape or form. And in fact, it's quite apparent that Surrey police have been instructed to facilitate UCOG by basically any means. And if that means completely ignoring any of the fundamental rights to peaceful protest, then that's what they should do. And some of the local residents, here is a picture from the front fence of a house about a quarter of a mile from the well site in Horse Hill. And as you can see there, the residents are letting their views be known. And these particular residents have been extremely disappointed at the behaviour of the police and have actually lodged numerous complaints about the police behaviour. Not only about the way they treat the protection community, but also the way they've been allowing the truck drivers to literally drive at the protectors. Well, things came home to roost, as it were, on Friday morning, because as we've seen elsewhere in the country, if the police fail to facilitate peaceful protest, then ultimately, what are you left with? Well, what you're left with is non-violent direct action. And on Friday afternoon of last week, there was a truly outstanding lock-on here, as is the first lock-on of this scale at Horse Hill. Two people are locked on the road, and the lady concerned, who was one of the two locked on there, it was her first lock-on, and she was on the road there for about 3.5 hours. And Surrey police actually showed their total ineptitude at dealing with this type of peaceful protest. And apparently the officer who was tasked with trying to release the lock-on device admitted that it was also his first attempt at dealing with such a situation. And so actually I think both parties there, Dave and Davina, I believe it was, I think everyone's called Dave and Davina in the anti-fracking community. But they did an outstanding patience for laying in the road there for about 3.5 hours. And as you can see, there was also somebody on top of the truck. Now, this isn't the choice of peaceful protest, but when the police fail in their fundamental responsibilities, what are you left with? Well, Horse Hill is still a live site. I think that UCOG are intimating that they're anticipating leaving the site sometime in the coming week, 10 days or so. So if you live in the Surrey or North Sussex area, then please take a trip along and go support the protectors there and the protection community. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what's occurring, then these people are extremely well informed. And you will find a level of knowledge and awareness that many find quite surprising. These are not your usual suspects by any stretch of the imagination. Well, many people ask, why do we do this? Why have we effectively devoted ourselves to trying to raise awareness of the dangers of allowing the unconventional gas industry into this country. Well, tonight I am hoping to have a lady as my guest. She's based in Queensland in Australia, and she is the daughter of George Bender. And sadly, today is actually the 5-month anniversary of George's death. And George was driven to take his own life by the pressures put upon him by the unconventional gas industry in southern Queensland. So I'm going to play a video here. It's from ABC in Australia, which was broadcast very shortly after George's tragic death. And hopefully, after the video has played out, I will be joined by his daughter, Helen Bender. But maybe there is some difficulty with the internet connection there in southern Queensland, so in which case we'll go to plan B. But take a look at this video.
You're on CSG companies, they don't really care how they treat you, really. One representative of the company said, look, if you get a negative effect of CSG, well, so be it, cop it and move forward.
Well, George was the very first campaigner. You know, he was the very first one that sort of went, hang on, I'm not going to accept these answers, I'm going to start asking questions.
And for 10 years, George Bender asked questions. He asked why a couple of his water bores had run dry after the arrival of nearby coal seam gas wells. He asked why CSG companies could come onto productive farmland, and why, in his opinion, they had more rights than the landowner.
This property here is under Arrow, and we've another property that's under Origin Energy, which is going to be, which they want to come on and put a dozen wells on at the moment. So you're dealing with that every day of the week virtually.
It escalated to the stage where they tried to buy his property, which is like cutting your arm off. A property that George has nurtured for years and is proud of. And I don't think anybody should be put under the pressure of having to sell to some multinational company.
Grazier Joe Hill had one of his regular phone chats to George Bender just a few days before his good mate took his own life. He says it wasn't just the CSG companies taxing his friend. There were also contamination concerns from the nearby Link Energy underground coal gasification plant, which is now the subject of a criminal prosecution for allegedly causing serious environmental harm, a prosecution Link is defending.
George has been really affected on all fronts. It doesn't matter which way he goes, he's been attacked.
And poor Joe, I sit there and I go, oh my God, what are you going to do without Dad?
When told the terrible news about her father, Helen Bender rushed home from Brisbane to join her mother and the family. She says George had recently been grappling with Origin Energy, which wanted to buy Chinta, one of the family's properties.
I think he just felt completely alone, lost, helpless. And I think his biggest fear was thinking he was going to be a failure and not being able to keep them off Chinta. You say no, they just force. And you're looking at land court.
Origin Energy has offered its condolences to the family and says it conducts business in line with its commitments to farmers and the communities in which it operates. When I arrived out at Hopeland to see the Bender family, I was told to meet them at Chinta, among fields bursting with wheat, barley and chickpeas.
When I was last here, George talked about this being a bumper crop, one of the best in years, and he was right. But just 2 days before their father's funeral, his 4 sons have come together to bring the harvest in.
Yeah, he would have been proud of this crop. It's probably be our best this year, and he's not going to see it. So it would have been nice for him to see it.
The death of George Bender has been felt beyond the fields of Hopeland. Vigils have been held around Australia, and there have been calls for more scrutiny of CSG companies and the way they deal with landholders.
These people are going to live with the scourge of CSG mining. They have no rights, they have no say in what comes onto their property or what's done to their property. Enough's enough. We don't want any more deaths, we don't need any more deaths.
George was a hero to everybody out there. He took them on. He fought alone, like so many families in the gas fields, against the might and greed of mining companies.
I caught up with George Bender for the last time 3 months ago. And while he wasn't giving up the fight, it was clear it was wearing on him.
Because sometimes you say, oh, let's go. But where would you go? To find a better country? Probably, you just wouldn't do it.
So you got to stick with it for now?
You stick with it and put up with it. That do? Yeah, that'll do.
That's good.
On the weekend, so many came to George Bender's funeral service in Chinchilla that people spilled from the church. Helen Bender told mourners that the family is vowing to keep George's battle going.
I'm very determined to make sure that we keep this going. I'm certainly not going to be losing anything without a huge, huge fight. And I'll do that. I have to. It was my dad. He's my dad. He will always be my dad.
The Bender family has lived and worked in this district for 108 years. Out here, the Bender roots run deep, and this tragedy has affected many.
If we had more of George in the world, we wouldn't have so much problem. I'll miss him. I just wish there was a phone to heaven, but so I could ring him up.
Well, I'm delighted to say that Helen has now joined us. I know it's outrageously early in the morning out there. It's 7 o'clock on Tuesday morning for you, Helen. And, you know, amazing that the line had dropped and we weren't able to get through to you, but we've got that sorted now. Helen, I know today is a poignant day for you. It's the 5-month anniversary, if you like, since your father sadly took his life. But it has, I know, launched you into becoming a campaigner that you never anticipated becoming. Now, I appreciate this is an extremely difficult day for you and tough to talk about this. But could you just talk us through? We've just seen the video that was played out by ABC, and just talk us through what, in your opinion, actually led up to George taking his life.
Oh, that's a pretty simple one. We could just point all the fingers at Origin Energy. 100% and solely 100% Origin Energy, obviously with the assistance of the Queensland government, because they are, a hungry government. They just want the money. Didn't matter how many phone calls, letters that George put through to the Queensland government, there was never any chance of him ever getting phone calls returned, or if he got letters, it would be just, dear George, thank you for your letter. Sorry, we can't help you at this time. Maybe you could try this department. So he just got the runaround for years and years. But ultimately, the final call came when, they just forced Dad into that corner, of wanting to, they gave him 30 days to sell his property. Otherwise, he'd be forced into a CCA agreement. And ultimately, that's a 20-day from the time they give you the notice of the intention to negotiate. It's 20 business days, and then they can take you through to mediation if you can't mediate, or arbitration mediation, whichever way they choose. And then you're into land court. And even though we don't know of anyone who's gone through to land court, ultimately I guess it's the prospect that you might be that first, because, there'll always be one that will go. And we obviously had a very, I think he was a psychopath for the land liaison officer. He was, and he, not only our experience, just through other landholders who had to experience the same person within Origin Energy, he was a bully. There's no other word really for it. You know, one of the last things Dad kept on saying to me in the hospital was, they just wouldn't leave me alone. 68-year-old man, 68-year-old man just being harassed and harassed to the point of he felt that the next logical step to save the property, to protect his family, was to take his life. It's uncalled for.
Well, and he'd been on this case for 10 years. I mean, he was one of the first landowners to be targeted by the unconventional gas industry when it was first establishing its footprint in southern Queensland.
Yeah, actually, the folders you see behind me is the work that I've been doing, pulling all of Dad's correspondence together. So, you know, I have the black folders are all the master folders, and that's everything in chronological order from start to finish. It's not everything, because the first company that approached us was QGC, but then they went away because Dad gave them such a hard time, and they were only looking for 3 or 4 wells because one of their tenements only crosses the corner of the property. So they went away thinking, oh, well, we'll come back to George later after we basically infiltrated the region. We'll just take over him later. So they went away for a while. But in that period when QGC went away and Origin had come and done their seismic testing, and they went away for a while to work out what, you know, to develop their fields, George didn't stop there. So that's when George took it upon himself to assist the other areas where it was entering. So that's like the Tara block. So that's where you have Dane, Praxi, Michael, Frederick, Brian Monk. So, you know, it's never been seen before where, you know, someone from Hopelands would go into that area of Tara, which is completely different. It's not prime agricultural land, but that didn't matter to George. It was all about standing up and protecting his fellow man in this battle against the industry. So even though there was a period there where we didn't have any direct contact, we knew they were coming. We knew they were coming back. And I think that's what Dad was about. He was like, well, I have to be in the front, knowing everything. So that's exactly what really ended up happening. He really did become obsessed with having to know everything, not only on the industry side, but in the government, in terms of following what bills, what amendments, in what acts. He studied it, he learnt it, and he knew it. You couldn't put it past the man. But I wish he was here, because he'd be telling me exactly what steps I'm doing wrong or what I should be doing next. But,
well, you know, you
like
let me tell
Joe
you,
Hill,
you're certainly an inspiration, I know, to the you know, the other farmers. And I mean, as you know, that the monks, they spoke very highly of George. When we did an episode back in October, episode 75. And now they absolutely admire and appreciate, you know, you stepping up to the plate, as it were, and taking over where George left off. And I know he'd be and is very, very proud of what you're doing, because, you know, this is the thing, isn't it? The industry basically works on the principle that everybody has their price, and they actually don't know how to deal with people that basically say, you know what, I'm not interested, and I'm going to fight you all the way. And this is done with a passion.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things that we were dealing with Origin quite intensely was the make good of our water bores that had been bubbling and kicking. Well,
we've got a short video of that, actually. We've got a short video. So let's just play the video, and then we can see, you can see exactly what we're talking about here.
You're going so calm.
So Helen, that borehole, how long had that borehole been providing water for the farm?
There was, don't quote me on the date, but it's something like in the 1950s, 40s.
Okay, so we're talking 50, 60 years. And at no time in that period was it under any kind of natural pressure. You actually had to pump the water to the surface.
Yes, so that bore is what you'd call a sub-artesian bore. So the water to come to the surface would require a pump or a mechanical means to actually bring the water to the surface. So through the activities of coal seam gas and the depressurization and the dewatering of the aquifers, basically the gas within the aquifer, they've escaped. That's how you look at it. Because as they dewater, there's gases that are left basically to run free. But what they do is they find the closest pathway. So here they found, obviously, the water bore. Now, within our area, we've had possibly about eight water bores that have now basically kicked similar to that in the region. And I'll just actually tell people that we've now got our third bore here on our other property, Valencia, has now started gurgling the gas. So it bubbles, it just gurgles. You can just hear the gas at the bottom just bubbling the water, the water table in the aquifer. So we're left with another bore now. So essentially what ended up happening was George was in extensive communications with Origin Energy because we had two bores on the property that were gurgling the gas, and they were identified in the report of the immediately identified bores that would basically be impacted by the coal seam gas activities. Impacted in that the water drawdown would be, one bore was 95 metre drawdown and the other bore was 105 metre drawdown. So that's the drop in the water table, 105 metres, just because of CSG, which means that bore becomes useless. There's no water.
And they knew this was going to happen before they even started the process.
They knew. Yeah, they knew. There's an updated report to come out. It's supposed to come out every 3 years, and it's delayed. It was supposed to come out December last year, and we still haven't seen sight of that report. Now, my guess is that, and from the analysis and the works that I've been doing just recently, the modelling in which both the Queensland government and the industry do is so basically crap into a model provides you with crap out of the model. So now they probably have more data that they put into the model. Now they've realised that, we've in the 2012 report we said 75 bores, but because we didn't have all the information, and now that we've got more information, 75 bores have probably gone out to 150 bores that are going to be immediately impacted. Therefore, it is very clear that the industry they do know what damage they're doing. They just don't know the extent. They don't know how to model the damage that they're doing. It's just basically, let's send as many people to the moon and we'll think about how we get back later, if we can get back. And that's probably the problem. Are we actually going to ever be able to repair the damage that we have, or are we're already on that path?
I've got this map here that you sent me through, which shows your 3 properties there in southern Queensland. And, regular viewers and people who have seen the documentary Voices from the Gasfield will know that actually by comparison of other areas, this is actually relatively lightly drilled. And yet, nonetheless, the damage is so extensive. And coupled with which, of course, you've also had the Link Energy underground coal gasification nightmare to deal with, and that's caused a 320 square kilometre disaster zone.
Yeah, and I got a hold of the magistrate's courts. So Friday it was at court where the magistrate ruled that Link Energy would go to trial on all 5 counts. So I read what the magistrate read out on the Friday last night. And look, Ian, I'm just going to have to ask you something. In your opinion, Link Energy had a gasifier 1, which I believe was successful. Then they got approval to do a second gasifier. They lost containment of the gas, but yet they got approval to do another
3 more gasifiers, gasifier 3, gasifier 4 and gasifier 5. Link Energy lost containment on all 3. How did they get approval to continue with 3 more gasifiers when they'd lost containment of the second gasifier?
Because
So
call it a hunch.
should we be blaming here?
Yeah, well, call it a hunch. I'd say
Call it a
that whoever it was that signed off on those approvals was benefiting in some way, shape, or form. Because even the most ignorant layman, having been told that they had lost control or lost containment of any one of the seams, would have said, you know what, until such time as you can demonstrate you get it under control, no more. And I mean, this is the whole problem, of course, with underground coal gasification, that, you know, the engineers will arrogantly say, oh, of course we can control the fire. Once we set it alight, we'll just starve it of oxygen. But the remarkable thing is that everywhere that this process has been tried, somehow, once that fire is started, it always manages to find a source of oxygen. And sadly...
Well, we've got the human element in the mistakes, don't we?
Well, and the problem is with underground coal gasification, just one mistake is literally irretrievable.
Irretrievable. Yeah.
Irretrievable.
Yeah. And that's exactly what the charges are. You know, irreversible damage. I mean, irreversible means it cannot be reversed. So, you know, and this is actually the same case where in 2011 Dad started complaining directly to Link Energy about their works, and that's where he was threatened that he would either be Link Energy wrote a letter to EHP to have him classified as a vexatious complainant, and then also proceed with legal charges for complaining.
It's absurd.
And then so that was 2011. And then in 2015, they're finally charged with environmental damage. So you sit there and just go, like, all that stress, all that worry, everything that he went through in 2011 over Link Energy. I think I estimated we probably had 900 pigs die. Combination of Link Energy and, you know, the flaring from the CSG activities. If you have the right, you know, metrics of wind conditions and everything that's going on, we can get the sick pigs the next day.
Well, and then the ruling, of course, that you couldn't actually bury the pigs deeper than 6 feet because of fear that the ground was actually explosive.
We do have that problem as well. I shouldn't laugh about it, but it's just sometimes you just have to go down the path of making some jokes out of it at times. Otherwise, you just get so. It's so frustrating. You see how obvious the corruption and the crimes that are being committed, and yet the number of people and the people who should take note just have those blinkers on and just keep walking. It's like a joke.
Well, Helen, we're going to take we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we're going to bring Trish Buchan into the conversation, because Trish is listening to you from Falkirk in the eastern side of Scotland, and you know, we have elections coming up in Scotland on May the 7th, and the expectation is that after May the 7th, the moratorium that is currently in place will be lifted, and the central belt of Scotland, where 80% of the population of Scotland reside, is going to be opened up for both underground coal gasification and CSG, or as we call it over here, coal bed methane, CBM. And I'm sure Trish is going to have some questions for you. So we'll be back after this short break.
The Alternative View Conference presents AV7 Humanity Rising. Speakers include Ian R. Crane, Thomas Sheridan, Patrick Henningsen, Max Egan, Zen Gardner, Dr. Graham Downing, Willem Felderhoff, Field McConnell, Vanessa Bealey, Michael Shrimpton, Fiona Burns. 13th to the 15th of May 2016, Horwood House, near Milton Keynes. Book online at alternativeview.co.uk or call 0207 558 8869. AV7, bringing together some of the most inspirational agents of real change.
Honestly, I've spoken at a lot of gigs, and I'd say this is the best gig that I've spoken at, just because of the lineup of speakers.
And welcome back. And I'm here this evening speaking with Helen Bender from Chinchilla in southern Queensland and Trish Buchan in Falkirk on the east coast of Scotland. Now, Trish, you've been listening to what Helen has had to say, and you're sitting in the heart of the Scottish sacrifice zone. And what we see here on screen is literally the areas that are currently licensed. Everything, of course, that's in black is underground coal gasification. Now, 2 of those licenses are currently up in the air because 5/4, of course, went to the wall a few weeks ago. But unfortunately, that simply means that those licenses can probably be picked up by Clough for literally cents on the dollar. The other coloured areas are the areas that are currently licensed for unconventional gas exploitation, primarily coal bed methane. And we know that once the Scottish elections have passed, that much of the rest of the Central Belt is going to be opened up primarily to INEOS, who are based in your hometown of Falkirk. So, Trish, what goes through your mind as you listen to the experiences of Helen and her father in Queensland?
One of the things that immediately jumped out was when Helen said about the pigs there, and if the fumes hit the pigs and the pigs die. And in Scotland, it's not pigs that the fumes are going to be hitting, it's 3.5 million people. So I think we've got, sorry, I've lost what I was saying there.
Yeah, 3.5 million people, and of course it's going to be the children and the elderly who suffer the effects first. Well, pets actually first. You know, the pets, particularly those who put their noses to the ground, because they're the ones who pick up the heavier than air elements like radon and radium. But I mean, basically, you are one of those. Is it 3.5 million people living in that Central Belt?
The population of the Central Belt, yeah, that includes Glasgow, Ayrshire, Falkirk, Edinburgh, Lothian and Fife, which is basically that area that you've just shown us on the map, and 3.5 million people. The licences that INEOS hold alone, which I think is 300 square kilometres, they're looking at 700 fracking wells and 600 coal bed methane wells just in that one area alone. So we see these shots from Google Earth of the fracking pads all over these wild areas in Pennsylvania and Queensland and so on, and you try and imagine that image superimposed over the Central Belt, and you're putting it over the top of hospitals and primary schools and nurseries and old people's homes and populations and city life.
You know, now when I was in Australia, I've made 2 trips out to the gas fields in 2012 and 2014. And, one of the comments that I heard is people say, well, why didn't the people in the United States come over and warn us about the risk that this industry brings to the region? And the reality was, of course, that there were people coming over from North America into Australia. And, a few people took note, but most, of course, thought, well, that's the US. It won't happen here in Australia. Our governments would never allow that to happen. And now we're in the same situation here in the UK. You know, we got people saying, well, you know, it can't be that bad because the government would never allow anything like this to be unleashed upon the population. Yeah. And we have had people come over to the UK from the US, from Australia, and try and raise awareness of it. But, you know, we're still struggling to get that message across.
Mm-hmm. There's a belief in Scotland at the moment that it's not going to happen because we have a moratorium in place. And a lot of people seem to believe that the SNP are completely against fracking, although there has never been a statement released to suggest that that's the case. The best we've got was a few days ago when Nicola Sturgeon said she was highly sceptical. But somehow I think that was actually more a response to the fact that the Scottish Labour Party and the Liberal Democrats have both stated this week that if they are elected in May, they will actually ban it. So for her to still be saying highly sceptical, really, when if she was going to ban it, she could just say we're going to ban it. The moratorium at the moment, there is 3 research contracts for that. One of them is to research the effects of seismic exploration. The other one is to research the infrastructure and traffic and noise impact. And the third one is to research decommissioning. Now,
third one is, say that again, the third one is?
To research the decommissioning process.
Right, right.
So why the Scottish Government are using taxpayers' money to pay a company to research decommissioning of an industry that they supposedly are going to ban is quite confusing. And the contract for the traffic and infrastructure was awarded to a company called Ramboll, and they had to withdraw that contract when a journalist exposed that we had a pro-fracker, Miss Catherine Blythe, her name is, and she was I think she was an expert witness in the Dart energy case that concerned communities of Falkirk raised. And it turns out that she is actually sitting on the board of Ramboll, which was the company that was awarded the contract to research traffic and infrastructure. So again, if you're looking to ban an industry, why are you giving the contract to not just pro-frackers, but notorious, well-known pro-frackers? I mean, Catherine Blythe has been in our Facebook group and been kicked out. You know, it's not like nobody knows who she is and they had to dig to find her background. So, well,
that's just the sheer arrogance. But now, Helen, you're listening here to Trish, who basically is in a similar situation to that of the population of southern Queensland a little over a decade ago. But the difference here is that obviously the evidence of the destruction, the contamination, literally, of the water, the soil, the air, the negative health impacts, and of course, what the industry unfortunately dismisses as collateral damage, you know, along the way. What counsel, what advice would you give to Trish and the people in the areas of the UK that are trying to resist this insidious industry?
Well, one of the things that popped into my mind is what baseline studies is happening in Scotland that never happened here in Queensland, because that is the loophole that the Queensland government and the industry here uses. They didn't do any baselining. So therefore, how do you measure your impacts if you don't know where you start from? So that's the loophole that we're in. No baselining, so we can't prove anything. You know, on the health side of things, who's to say it wasn't a pre-medical condition that someone had? In terms of the environment, well, no one knows because no one did any studies up front. And the industry and the government use that to their advantage.
And of course, you've got the other, to compound the problem, you know, the population density of the central belt of Scotland is about 100 times that of southern Queensland.
It does my head in, Ian. It really does. I actually wrote something in my the Senate submission that I submitted yesterday because we have that this Senate inquiry into unconventional gas mining in Australia. And I obviously presented a lot of pictures of what had happened to our pigs since 2010. But it would make you think, if this is what we saw, what was happening in our pigs, but the anatomy of the pig and the human are very similar. Pigs are just proportionally smaller. So similar, in fact, that it's actually easier to list our differences. One of our differences is our facial expressions. Pigs have bigger ears. They also have a visible tail. Pigs also have different feet, including the position and the number of toes on their feet. But that is about as far as our differences extend to. Now, if this is the impact on pigs that cannot coexist with this industry, and you're going to put that industry into a population that's going to the central belt of Scotland, I'd be very concerned. I'd be very, very, very concerned.
So, I mean, the industry, sadly, as I've said, talks about sacrifice zones. It talks about collateral damage. It does a calculation. Basically, can it pay off the individuals or the businesses that suffer the damage? Can it keep them quiet with confidentiality agreements and the like? And, whilst they might get away with that in a relatively thinly populated area, it is just mind-numbing. I mean, the magnitude of the arrogance and the socio-psychopathy of the mindset that basically leads people to think that they can do this.
Ian, I'd actually have to say, sorry, I'll let Mel go.
Yeah, I haven't even mentioned the underground coal gasification that's to happen within the fourth estuary either, which is the Grangemouth refinery, which is, I think, the biggest hydrocracker in Europe. I might be wrong there, but it's definitely the biggest in Britain. Sits right on the banks of the fourth estuary, and we've got a coal mining history in this area that goes back so far that we don't have maps for some of them. There's maps that have got a sort of a vague greyed out area that means there's mines here, but we don't actually know what they are. And here we're talking about the actual hydraulic fracturing. We're talking about coal bed methane, or coal seam gases, you guys call it in Australia. And we're also talking about underground coal gasification within a heavily mined area with a refinery on the doorstep and 3.5 million people. And Helen said there about baseline studies. And we actually asked INEOS at one of the public, they call them public exhibitions, I call them public love bomb, but we asked them if they would be taking baseline studies, and they told us that wasn't their job, that would be up to SEPA. So we have submitted a question to SEPA asking them about that, and that was over a year ago, and we're still waiting on a response. So I would take that as there are no baseline studies being done. When the coal bed methane was done at Ayr, there was no baseline studies. So we already have a precedent of that.
So, I mean, basically, if the two were unleashed concurrently, if basically the coal seams were fracked to extract the coal bed methane, and the coal seams under the estuary were set alight to generate the syngas. I mean, this is an absurd time bomb. I mean, I could literally sort of foresee a situation where, the whole of the central belt of Scotland is effectively uninhabitable because basically it's all alight.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to say. It's either going to be uninhabitable because of chemical contamination, or it's just going to go boom. There's only so much that a small, heavily populated area can take. And we are already the most industrialised part of the whole country, especially at Falkirk. I mean, we've got heavy industry all around us. And the idea of setting a light to the ground underneath it in one place whilst sucking primordial liquid out of the seams in another place for their coal bed methane, and then doing fracking elsewhere whilst it's all sort of filling up these mine shafts underneath the refineries. It's like some sort of apocalyptic novel that you just couldn't make up.
You couldn't make it up. No, you absolutely couldn't. I mean, like I said, it's a socio-psychopathic mindset. Helen, I mean, it is almost laughable, isn't it, that it's even being considered?
Well, quite interestingly, I was thinking before when you're mentioning about payouts and confidentiality agreements and the gagging clauses that the industry enforces on as many people as they can. But you have to just come back to the basic question of, if there was absolutely nothing wrong with the industry, why did they need to pay people out? Why do they need to gag them? Why do they need to have confidentiality clauses? It's a basic, well, what are you wanting people to not talk about? A perfect industry wouldn't need that. And it's similar to here in Queensland. Wow, it's a gas field out here. It's great. But if anyone important comes out, the whole industry is shut down. They close off everything. Everything's quiet. You don't see anything. But yet, if it was a great industry, why can't they show our politicians an operational gas field? Why do they have to shut it down every time they come out? What are they hiding? It's just, you've got to ask some very basic, simple questions.
By visiting one of the sites, I believe I read somewhere.
We don't have anybody in Australia regulating or monitoring this industry. They've set up a department, like a CSG compliance unit. No one in that compliance unit no one in that unit is qualified to know what they're doing.
So that's the box ticking office thing, yeah.
It's just to get people to feel good that there's something there. It's just a name. But if you call in for a complaint, you could call in and ask them how many wells. They wouldn't be able to tell you how many wells. So how can they be a compliance unit if they don't even know how many wells are drilled? Let's go back to basic fundamentals. No idea.
And yet they will always make the same observation. We have the most robust regulatory control anywhere in the world.
Strange standards. We're operating to best practices.
It's the same script wherever you go, and it's hollow wherever you go. It has no substance to it whatsoever.
One of the...
I thought, well, how can Australia have best in the world gold star standards? But America have got the best in the world gold star standards, and now Scotland are going to have the best in the world gold star standards, and there can only be one of them that's the best in the world. So,
well, and on the basis that both the US and Australia have gold standard, and you look at the problems that the industry has created in these countries, then it doesn't take a rocket scientist to extrapolate that the UK. We have potentially a greater opportunity to prevent this abomination from being launched or unleashed upon this country than the people in the US or Australia had. We have no excuse whatsoever because, we have the experience of these people. So, it really is a case of fool me once.
Yeah, and I think for the Scottish Government to claim that they have to, basically what they're saying with these research contracts is, they need to go ahead with this to see if it's going to go wrong, and if it doesn't go wrong, we'll go ahead with it. So they're refusing to take the empirical rise in evidence that's coming from all over the world about the effects of fracking, and they're saying that no, we have to research it because only we can figure out what the effects are going to be, and that to me is the absolute height of arrogance.
Well, exactly, and of course what they'll do is if they get away without too many problems, and by the way, the track record is such that they'll probably have problems right from the get-go anyway, because everyone else has. I mean, whether it's Quadrilla, whether it's iGas, whether it's Third Energy, whether it's Rathlin Energy, the mother frackers that are trying to sue me for bankruptcy right now. Basically, they've all created problems because they are fundamentally incompetent. They are cowboys attempting to make a fast buck. I have to say that I'm very grateful to the fact that the price of oil has descended to such depths, because that might actually, be our saving grace to some extent. But, we have to learn from this. Helen, if there was an opportunity to, get you and David Monk, I know Brian can't travel anymore, but to get yourself and David Monk across to the UK. Because I know that ultimately the only way in which we're actually going to get this stopped in the UK is for there to be a mass awakening of the damage and the contamination that this industry will inevitably create if it's allowed to go ahead. But in the absence of that being plausible in the sort of foreseeable future, I would hope that perhaps you'd come and join us again on Fracking Nightmare and share your insights and your experience and keep us updated as well as to the progress that you make in the inquiries in Queensland.
Yeah, look, one of the things that's definitely happening in Australia, which is an absolute joke, is that these companies get an environmental authority to do their activities. But let's just say with the RO water, they can't meet the standards that were set in the original environmental authority, so they just make
new ones.
Apply.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh no, they just apply for amendments. They just say, oh look, we need to amend this because we can't meet those standards. So they send it off to the government. The government just says, yep, no worries, tick it. So they avoid their breaches on the environmental breaches by amending the environmental authority so that they avoid their further breaches.
Oh, well, we've seen that here as well. I mean, the first frack triggered a seismic event, or two seismic events. So they introduced a set of traffic lights that says that, okay, we stop work if there's a seismic event greater than 0.5 on the Richter scale. But then in the next paragraph, they say, but yeah, in the long term, we know this is unworkable and we'll have to lift it to 3.5.
Lift it, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is the way it works.
So the industry, so here it is. That is just confirmation that no matter where the industry operates, they operate under the same wrong, just insidious practices, don't they?
Exactly.
They follow the same steps.
The same template.
In the US. Now they've done it in Australia, and they will do it in Scotland.
They've even actually refined it further here because you may not be aware, but last year the government actually established a political definition of what constitutes a frack. They basically said that if you pump less than 1,000 cubic metres, which is 219,000 gallons and change, for a single stage, or less than 10,000 cubic metres, which is 2.2 million gallons, in the whole operation, then it's not a frack. So
we know, we really just worked out where our actual problem is. Our actual problem is the government. We need to remove all government, don't we, across the country?
Without any shadow of doubt. And, it's not just on this issue, of course, it's many, many other issues.
Many other issues, exactly. I think every country is at a point where we need to all revolt and the people need to stand up and take back what power that they didn't mean to give away, but was probably more or less stolen from them. I think it is time for the people to stand up.
I couldn't agree more. Helen, we're out of time, and I do want to play out a tribute to your father. I know that a year ago, if anybody had told you you'd be doing what you're doing right now, you'd have probably laughed at them. But thankfully, you are doing what you're doing. You're a powerful force. You have a big voice, and I know that you've had a big impact by sharing your experiences tonight. And, I hope that we'll have the opportunity to continue this conversation at a future date. Meanwhile,
Absolutely.
Trish, of course, you're in Scotland, you're at the front end of this. And I hope that you and Helen will actually, continue to communicate because, you're in the front line here. I got a picture of, this is you on the right-hand side of the picture there. This is at the SNP conference this weekend. You're doing a great job, obviously, trying to raise awareness amongst the people of the Central Belt about the disaster that the SNP are going to unleash beneath them if the SNP do get the expected majority in Holyrood in May. But I hope that you two guys will continue to talk to each other and share insights, share ideas, because ultimately, as you say, we've got to change the government. And the only way we change the government is to get enough people to understand that they're being totally shafted. So thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you, Ian. Really appreciate it. It was an honour.
Thank you. Ditto. And thank you, Trish. And obviously, we shall probably see each other before I actually have the opportunity to meet with Helen. But I do hope to get back out to Australia to do a sequel to Voices from the Gasfields.
Oh, brilliant.
That'd be great.
Okay, so we're going to play out tonight. And this is a video that was put together in the immediate aftermath of George's sad departure.
Farmer George just lost his life. 10 years of trying to win the fight. They took his rights, destroyed his boars. His every plea was just ignored. A broken will, a broken man, a victim of our resource plan. An honest man with simple needs, destroyed by endless greed. And governments sit on their hands. Their words no more than shifting sands. Their promises like George's boars, echoes that are soon ignored. Men in boardrooms shake their heads without a care of why he's dead, while farmers lose their family lands and lose their life by their own hand. Pressures are too hard to bear. Seems the world just doesn't care. Companies will crush your dreams the way they're fracturing their seams. They leave destruction in their wake. Tell us it's for profit's sake. Agreements to restore the land are soon forgotten, out of hand. Not just a farm, not just a man, not just a home or a lifelong plan was broken on this darkest day. So too was our Australian way. So too was our Australian way. So too was our Australian way. Farmer George just lost his life. 10 years of trying to fight the fight. An honest man with simple needs, destroyed by endless greed. Destroyed by endless greed. Destroyed by endless greed.